Okay, I believe I'm live. Hello, my name's Tim Westbrook, and I've got a few frequently asked questions that I'm going to talk about today in this live stream. Are there rules in a sober living home? Can I have a job while at a sober living home? Can I have a pet while in a sober living home? And what about my emotional support dog? Do sober living homes require residents to attend 12-step meetings? And can I leave my sober living home? So those are the questions that I have for today. And let me just make sure I'm going to share this now. Okay, here we go. So first question, are there rules in a sober living home? The most basic and fundamental rule at a sober living home is abstinence from drugs and alcohol. And typically this is going to be enforced via random drug testing. However, what I would say is that the random living, when people are in a sober living home, they're trying to learn how to live life differently because for someone to really achieve long-term recovery, everything has to change about how they lived their life. That means new eating habits, new sleeping habits, new exercise habits. You pray and meditate. You start working a 12-step program, new hobbies, new interests, new friends. Like everything has to change. And if someone goes back to their old environment with no rules or the rules that they were living by before they got clean and sober, like it's just not going to work. So yeah, there has to be rules in a sober living home. The most fundamental rule, as I already said, is sobriety. Like you have to stay clean and sober. Beyond that, the highly structured sober living homes, which in my opinion are going to be better and give you a better chance of long-term recovery, are again, you're out of bed by 8 o'clock, your beds are made, chores are done, the home's immaculate, you're cleaning up after yourself, you're doing your chore, you're living, it's a community living space. So that means that you're cleaning up after yourself because every single thing that you do affects everybody in the entire house. So as an alcoholic or drug addict in the addiction, I'm selfish, I'm self-centered, and it's all about Tim. And most people that are in their addiction, I would say pretty much 100%, if you're in your addiction, it's all about you. And so living in a community home, a sober living home, that means you learn how to live with other people. You learn how to clean up after yourself, every single thing that you do. And that means, again, doing your chores, cleaning up after yourself, not watching TV, not watching Jerry Springer during the middle of the day, cleaning up your mess in the kitchen, cleaning up your dishes. For example, if you leave one dish, you leave a spoon in the sink and you don't clean it. The next person leaves a cup. The next person leaves a plate. Next thing you know, you've got an entire sink full of dishes, and the kitchen becomes a disaster. That's how it happens. It happens that quickly. So the other thing about living at a sober living home, most sober living homes are going to be 12-step based, or it's a requirement that you're working a program of recovery. Typically, it's a 12-step program. It doesn't have to be a 12-step program. It can be SMART recovery. It can be refuge recovery. It can be one of the other recovery programs. But typically at a sober living home, it's a requirement that you're working a program of recovery because, again, living at a sober living home, you're learning how to live life differently. You're working on yourself. This is the only way you're going to learn how to become a different person and transform your life is by doing something, doing the work, as they say. Okay, that's the first question. Second question I have here, can I have a job and a vehicle while at a sober living home? Can I have a job and can I have a vehicle while at a sober living home? Rules regarding jobs and vehicles typically vary independently depending upon the sober living home, the type of sober living home, whether or not you're still in treatment, meaning outpatient therapy or partial hospitalization or in some sort of a treatment program. So since residents often come to sober living at different points in their sobriety, some sober living homes may require a gap of time before the individual is allowed to return to work. So again, depends upon where you're at in the continuum of care. However, reentry into the workplace is highly encouraged at sober living homes, and some even offer resume and employment support services. So at Camelback Recovery, we require that somebody has a purpose. So a purpose means you're in IOP, PHP, you have a job. That doesn't mean you have a career. This isn't like a career job. You're not going out and hitting a home run on the job of your dreams while you're in sober living, but it's a requirement. My experience, it's required that you have a purpose. Because if you're sitting around the house all day long and you don't have a purpose, again, work, school, IOP, PHP, you're volunteering, like you're doing something productive with your time, then that's going to be the main requirement. And then as far as having a vehicle goes, again, just really depends. At Camelback Recovery, while someone is in our sober living, and if they're in IOP, PHP, if they're at our sober living home, they can have a vehicle, because again, it's a requirement that they have a purpose. And many times when they have a purpose, if they have a vehicle, if you have a license, and if you're allowed to legally drive, then yes, you can have your vehicle. But if you're in some sort of a treatment program at Camelback Recovery with Camelback Recovery, then it would be a case-by-case situation. But if you're in one of our sober living homes that are just sober living, then yes, you can have a vehicle. Next question I got. Can I have a pet while in a sober living home? And what about my emotional support dog? So that's a good question. And sober living homes vary when it comes to pet policies. Some sober living homes do allow residents to bring their pets with them, as long as the pets are not disruptive, while other sober living homes have a no pet policy, partly because it is important for people to be able to focus on their own recovery before becoming responsible for another life. And some sober living homes have a policy where somewhere in between those two extremes. So sober living home or pets, in my experience, in my opinion, can be therapeutic. I wouldn't say that going out and getting a brand new pet while you just get clean and sober. I mean, again, that is another responsibility. So it might be harder to go and get a puppy, for example. A new puppy is a lot of work. An emotional support animal, dogs, they are therapeutic. Again, it just depends upon. There are not any sober living homes that I'm aware of in Arizona that will accept pets. And mainly it's because if you have, even though pets are therapeutic, dogs are therapeutic, and even though they can be great for the therapeutic environment, if one person is allergic, then it's a no-go. If the dog is not well trained, it's a no-go. Somebody has to take care of the dog and make sure that the dog is not disruptive in the home. And I've had a couple of experiences with this. We actually had one of our residents had an emotional support dog at Sojourn, and Sojourn was a sober living home. It was on an acre, so huge yard, and we actually had 3 buildings on the property. And the dog was super old and very well trained, never barked, and totally just low key. And it was really good for the residents of the home. We had another situation where our house manager had a dog, and it was a little poodle named Buzz. And Buzz again was about, I don't know, 12 pounds, and good for the environment. So, and it was the house manager's dog. So it wasn't one of the residents that brought the dog to the property. It was the house manager. So the house manager took care of Buzz, and it was good for that environment. But I would say for the most part, if you have a dog or a cat or some other sort of a pet, you're going to have to make lots of phone calls, and typically they're not going to be allowed at, and allowed at a sober living home. And even if you have a licensed emotional support dog, many times people have come to me with that as well. Because they have an emotional support dog, they should be allowed to bring their pet to the sober living home. A sober living home is different than, say, like a hotel or an airplane or something like that. So the same rules don't apply to a sober living environment or to a group home environment, again, because there might be people that are allergic there and other reasons. So the same rules don't apply to sober living homes. An emotional support dog, because you can take an emotional support dog and have it live with you at your apartment or in a hotel or on an airplane or something like that. Same rules don't apply to a sober living environment. Do sober living homes require residents to attend 12-step meetings? The vast majority of sober living homes are based in the principles of recovery as originally devised by the 12-step programs like Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, Gamblers Anonymous. However, 12-step programs are designed to be non-professional organizations with no institutional affiliations. For this reason, no sober living home has an official relationship with any 12-step program. However, many sober living homes do operate on the same philosophy as 12-step programs. This philosophy can be stated simply: individuals with addictions cannot recover using their own willpower, but they can manage their condition if they admit that they have a problem and learn to rely on other people who suffer from the same problem. Many sober living homes encourage or even require that residents attend daily or at least regular 12-step meetings. Some sober living homes even hold 12-step meetings on site. The specific 12-step program that a sober living home recommends can vary. Some may require that members attend one program like AA, NA, or GA, or SLAA, while others make individual recommendations based on the specific substances a person was addicted to. My experience, Camelback Recovery, we require that people work a program of recovery. And AA or NA or one of the 12-step programs is going to be our first choice. Camelback Recovery is 12-step based. Most sober living homes that I'm aware of are 12-step based. However, other recovery programs can be worked as well. Again, as long as a 12-step program is worked, as long as a program of recovery is worked, because this is the opportunity for someone to transform the way that they live. Attending daily meetings is a great way to develop new tools and coping skills in sobriety. It allows sober living home residents to learn from the experiences of people who have been sober for long periods of time. Moreover, it provides them with an opportunity to build their sober support systems. While sober living homes provide a social support network as well, 12-step meetings allow residents to expand the scope of their network. It is an excellent preparation for life outside of a sober living home, during which it is essential for individuals to remain involved in recovery. Typically, when someone goes to a sober living home, that's their opportunity to build their foundation in recovery. That means working a 12-step program, you have a sponsor, you're going to steps, you're doing the deal as they say, and you start building friendships with people that are not just in the home, but also people out in the recovery community. And so I can remember when I first got clean and sober, I went to one or two meetings a day for my first couple of years. And as I was going to more and more meetings and I was doing service work and I was involved with the 12-step community, what I realized is that the people that I saw in the rooms of AA, I also saw out in the world at coffee shops, hiking Camelback Mountain, hiking Squaw Peak, doing yoga, doing CrossFit, having like whatever I was doing. And even still today, when I'm out in the world, I see people that I saw, that I know from the rooms, and it's a very comforting feeling to know people and to have that community and to have that foundation. I have, at any given time, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, I've got, I don't know, I've got a long list of people that I can call if I ever need to call somebody, if I ever need support. And that has really helped me over the years. It's important to note that the programs and resources offered at sober living homes go beyond that which is offered at 12-step meetings. Sober living homes provide a variety of services from mentoring to helping people find employment, and 12-step meetings are considered just one element among many others that work synergistically with sober living homes to help individuals recover from substance use disorders and to rebuild their lives. Okay. Can I leave my sober living home? Well, yes, of course you can leave your sober living home. I guess that's a good question. To lessen the chances of relapse, we encourage residents to leave after having developed a strong program of recovery. So it's typically recommended that someone stay in sober living for at least 3 to 6 months. And some people, depending upon the severity of your addiction or their addiction, would determine how long you need to stay or how long you should stay in sober living. Sober living home staff work with residents to ensure that by the time they graduate, they have a strong support system, a job, and other important resources conducive to long-term recovery. As such, it is best to stay for the entire duration of the sober living program and coordinate your graduation with the program staff. However, you are free to move out of your sober living home at any time. We do prefer that you give notice ahead of time and think over your decision carefully. Nonetheless, no individual can be forced to stay in a sober living home. If a person chooses to leave early, they may be at higher risk of certain consequences. And what I would say is just don't make the decision to leave impulsively. You get in a fight with your roommate. You get in a fight with your house manager. You don't like being held accountable. Screw this. I'm out of here. I've seen that happen so many times. It never ends well. When it works, typically there's a couple things here, which if your commitment to a sober living home is 3 months, make sure you stay for at least 3 months. Regardless, even if you feel like you're ready to go, just stay. It's only 30 more days. It's only 60 more days. It's only 90 more days. The longer you stay in a sober living home, the more likely it is that you're going to be ready for the world, and you're going to be less likely to relapse when you're triggered, when you go back to your old life. And remember, you drank and used and did drugs and lived the way you lived for probably a good part of your life. If you're 30 years old and you started drinking at 15, that means half of your life you were drinking and using, and that was your go-to when you were triggered or when you were happy or when you were sad or when you wanted to feel better. That was the solution. So figuring out how to have a different solution is one of the goals of sober living. That's why self-care is one of the big requirements at Camelback Recovery. We require that people do 5 units of self-care per week. And what that means is you're doing yoga, you're going to the gym, you're doing a high-intensity interval training class, you're going for a bike ride, you're getting a massage, you're getting your nails. It really depends. It's different for each person. Self-care looks different for each person. But regardless, if you decide to leave, and let's say you make a commitment to stay at a sober living home for 3 months or 6 months, and you decide that you want to leave early, what I would say is, again, don't just make the snap decision to leave. Make sure that you have all of your support system on board. If your sponsor agrees, your therapist agrees, the house manager agrees, your friends in recovery agree, your loved ones agree. If you can get people in your corner on your side and in support of you leaving, and you plan it out and you give notice, and if 2 weeks notice is required, you give at least 2 weeks notice, and you follow the steps. This is being just a responsible, good person. And that's what we're learning how to do while living at a sober living home. So when a person leaves early, there's just a higher chance of relapse. And I've seen it. Anybody that's in recovery has seen it, the relapse before the relapse. And I've seen it happen where literally people, they decide they're going to leave the sober living home and they're not ready. Or let's say, even if you commit to 3 months, right? As you get near the 3 months, you're not totally ready to leave yet. And then your plan was to leave. So you're not ready. You don't have all of your ducks in a row. You don't know where you're going to live yet. You don't know who you're going to live with. You're like, everything's not set up. And I've literally seen it happen where someone relapses the day they leave, the day they discharge. And they could work a great program for 90 days while they're with us. And then they're just not ready to leave yet. And so it gets sabotaged. So what I would say is stay as long as you need to stay. Stay longer than you think you should stay. And then your chances of staying clean and sober and living the life that you deserve is much more likely. So, and also there might be legal reasons why a person needs to stay in a sober living home longer. So it just kind of depends upon your situation. I would say the recommendation is always just stay in the sober living home as long as you possibly can until you're totally ready to leave, until you have your ducks in a row. And ultimately, it's recommended that you stay in a sober living home until your life is better. And the other thing people say is you should stay in a sober living home until you're afraid to leave. When you're afraid to leave, then it's like, okay, your guard, you have your guard up. You're gonna be careful. You know that you're not invincible. Then that would be more likely when you're ready. But if you say, oh, I'm good, I got this, I'm not worried about anything, then that's when you should be concerned. So if you have another question that you would like answered the next time I go on air, then type it in the comments below. And thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.